Breathe him in.
Girls, get inside!
He'll make you do terrible things.
I always love a horror film that puts someone going crazy against an interesting backdrop, so Hold Your Breath was right in my wheelhouse.
Good.
And you're always so fearless in your performances. How do you go about approaching a character that has this descent into madness?
Well, I love nothing more than a descent into madness because I because I think I live in, abject terror that it's going to happen to me one day. So I think my way of staving it off is to just act it all out now, and then I don't have to do it myself. Yeah, I don't know. I do really feel like in the horror space, it is the best opportunity to play high stakes, and you're literally dealing with life and death usually in these stories, and which gives you a big wide berth to play all kinds of things and to really care. I feel like you can never do this sort of thing that happens sometimes in modern acting, which is to act like nothing really matters. And I feel like in the horror, the psychological film, psychological thriller space, you are often dealing with people who care very much about living or dying. And so the stakes just couldn't be higher, so you get to really let it rip.
Could not agree more.
Yeah.
And with most films, or most movies filming out of order, how do you keep that descent into madness consistent?
Well, the first time I've ever done this was on this movie, which is I made a gigantic calendar that sort of stuck on the wall in my trailer, and I went through each scene. Because in this particular movie, we've got Margaret's reality, her waking reality, her sleeping reality, her nightmare reality. It was and the timeline, once people see the movie, they'll understand there's this kind of thread of something where you're not quite sure where you are in space and time. It's because some of it is happening in Margaret's mind. And so I had to have a big calendar that I could run back to my trailer and refer to, because it was absolutely hard to keep it all straight. And sometimes, when you're shooting a movie and you're shooting everything out of order, sometimes you're doing 4 scenes in one day, and one is a very normal scene, and one is you're losing your mind, and the next one you're just eating a bowl of cereal, so it's just figuring out how to calibrate all that and to make sure that you're staying on top of it. The only way I could do it with this one was to have a giant chart I could refer to.
Does that mean you had it a scale, as in a 1 to 10 in terms of
Yes, actually. It wasn't as literal as 1 to 10, but it was certain descriptive words that were hypervigilant, little things that were various, an example of that for sure, but they were more words as opposed to numbers.
Yeah. Well, and this was the debut film of the directors. What gave you the confidence in their vision to go on this journey with them?
I think it was simply the script, and Carrie had written it, and I thought the script was really special, and that it was grounded in this reality that the truth is, the heart center of the story is we are really just watching a woman mourning the loss of her youngest child, and that how that causes her to behave consequentially is why the rest of the movie happens. And so I was really drawn by that sort of very grounding aspect of it, and it wasn't just, a bunch of teenagers getting chased around a lake, and you know what I mean? Not that those movies aren't great, but it's just, this was a little bit richer and deeper and more complicated than that, which I really was excited by. And I think, if she put that on the page that way, I thought she was liable to, sometimes I think about this where it's some of the greatest directors in the world can direct some movie that comes out, and then a year later another one comes out that's not as good, and it's you never know what the alchemy is and the exact recipe for success in that way, and you can still be a supremely talented filmmaker or a great actor, and it doesn't always work, and it's that doesn't mean it wasn't worth the effort. So I thought, even if they can't go all the way with this, and they don't, maybe it is their first film and I don't know what the result will be, I still felt like it was worth the dice roll.
I think that's a great sentiment, and thank you so much for talking with me today. This has been
thank
great.
you so much, JoBlo.
Thank you.
Doctor says it's just too much dust in the air.
It's a battle. It's good you brought the girls, Margaret.
Why is that?
I guess you haven't heard about the drift.
So, funny story, I was watching the film and it gets to the moment where your body is found in the dust storm and you'd only had one scene prior, and I went, what the hell am I going to talk to her about? But thankfully that was not your death, but I was in full panic mode for about 20 seconds.
So funny. Yes, that scene will just always make me think of cocoa powder.
That was actually going to that led me in my next question. I was going to ask, was that concoction edible?
It was just cocoa powder. It was so disgusting. And I was underneath this dirty blanket. That was a particularly challenging, dirty day. That was like a really challenging experience as a human. Just being kind of covered in, like being buried in dirt is a really, I mean, it's kind of challenging thing. Makes you feel the feel, not gonna
I
lie.
assume that's the kind of thing that you don't really think about when you have the script and then it's the day of and you're like, oh, I have to actually be covered in dirt.
Yeah, my face.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah.
This is bringing up something in me as a human that it's uncomfortable feeling, but worth it.
Well, and what intrigued you most about the script for Hold Your Breath?
I love that this is a horror film, but I always say good horror films make you jump, they scare you, they make you feel things, but great horror films make you jump, they scare you, they make you feel things, but there's a thread of humanity and heart. And this, I think, falls into the latter. There's two narrative threads that are particularly applicable to our current day planet. The first is that the Dust Bowl was a man-made climate disaster, and we are navigating a man-made climate disaster right now. And the second is people were forced inside because they were afraid of getting killed from what was outside. And this movie was written, ironically, right before COVID, but we filmed it after COVID, after we all experienced having to stay inside because we were afraid of being killed or getting sick from what was outside. And what happens when you're forced inside and you're isolated, and what happens to your mental health, and how do people behave and talk about mental health. So those are pretty extraordinary themes to find in a horror film.
Yeah. Well, and so what was like the filming actually like? Because I couldn't tell. It was hard to tell if the dust was all digital or if they actually were throwing dust at you on set. How was the day-to-day like with this?
So dusty. We dirty the entire time. I just felt I would find dirt for so long after I worked, and everywhere and everything, and we just couldn't get away from it. So, I mean, there's some help here and there from visual effects, like there are in every film that ever happens
Yeah.
now. I would say the bulk of the dust in this film was real, which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, and I really enjoyed when you became more antagonistic in the film. Do you have any interest in playing a villain in the future?
And they're the best parts to play. I always love that villains don't know they're villains. It's always sort of interesting to me. But yes, the other thing that was fascinating about this piece is that the the darkness that I played was all in Margaret's mind. That was sort of fun to play. There was such a line that we had to walk by being creepy and scary and not playing creepy and scary. Like, what was the reality of that for Margaret? So, yeah, I mean, hey, there's nothing better than um, playing a character that gets to show lots of sides and somebody's dream space.
Yeah, I love movies that are about a descent into madness. So thank you so much for talking with me today. This has been great.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.